Nightmare Mountain, Chapter 11. She couldn't do it. Molly knew what she needed to do, but she simply couldn't do it. Her strength was gone. There was no way she could climb back up to the lift and go after Glendon and help him get down off the mountain. The thought of moving as far as the front door was more than she could bear. She had told him that if nobody came for him soon, to get himself to the lift and come down. But would he do it? Could he? She remembered how sick he looked when she left him. His face was too pale and his lips looked blue. She thought about how long he had been unconscious and about his broken arm. Was he able to crawl to the lift? If he did, could he make it down all the way to the house? He would die up there. She knew it. No matter what she had told him to do, he was too weak to follow her instructions. Glendon would freeze to death, and when Uncle Phil came home, he would have to go up the mountain and bring down his son's body. No! Molly sat up straight and brushed the tears from her cheeks. No, she thought. I won't let it happen. I won't. I've made it this far, and I will make it the rest of the way. She stood up, and a feeling of dizziness washed over her. She grabbed the back of the chair and steadied herself. Then she took a deep breath, went to the kitchen cupboard, and removed a container of hot chocolate mix. She filled a mug with milk, heated it in the microwave, and stirred in several heaping spoonsful of chocolate mix. Leaning against the counter, she drank quickly, feeling the hot liquid on her throat as she swallowed. She put a slice of bread in the toaster and then dunked the toast in the hot chocolate and ate it. Immediately she felt stronger. While she ate, she gave Bucky some dog biscuits. As she watched him crunch the biscuits, she considered trying to send him for help. She could tie a note to his harness and tell him to go to town. She had read stories of dogs who saved their owners by running many miles for help. Bucky was smart. Maybe he would go all the way to town and find someone to save them. But what if Bucky didn't go to town? What if he ran the wrong way? What if he chased a rabbit or a squirrel? The nearest town was several miles away. What if nobody found the note on him? Or what if Bucky got lost and never came back? What then? Molly sighed. She knew she couldn't stay here and hope that Bucky would bring help. Not while Glendon was lying up there in the snow. She would have to save him herself. She wished she had a thermos bottle so she could take some hot chocolate up to Glendon. He needed warmth and nourishment too. But she didn't know where a thermos bottle was, and she knew she couldn't waste time and energy hunting for one. As she finished her hot chocolate, she tried to think what she should take with her. She wasn't sure she had the strength to make it back to Glendon at all, much less carry any supplies. But she knew she should try to figure out what she was going to do before she left. A rope. If she had a rope, she might be able to use Bucky's strength, like she had wanted to do the night before. Food. She put a banana in her jacket pocket, thinking it would be easy for Glendon to eat. A splint. Glendon needed something stronger on his arm to hold it straight while she moved him down the mountain. She looked around. A pottery jug on top of the stove contained an assortment of cooking utensils. Molly selected a long-handled wooden spoon and then grabbed a dish towel too. Both fit in her second jacket pocket. She found a piece of paper and quickly wrote a note. Dear Uncle Phil, Glendon and I are up on the mountain. There was an avalanche, and he was hurt. Your brother Crane stole the llamas. She signed her name and put the note on the kitchen table. If she and Glendon didn't make it back, Uncle Phil would know where they were and what had happened. Come, Bucky, she said, and she and Bucky left the house together. She went to the barn first, found a coil of rope hanging on a nail, and put it over her shoulder. Once more she started up the trail, her legs hurting with every step she took. Bucky stayed at her side even though she didn't tell him to heel. She wondered if he sensed how tired she was. Maybe he was trying to encourage her to keep going, or maybe he was tired too. As she passed the lower pasture, she saw the llamas watching her warily. Crane's rope still dangled from the neck of the dark brown one. Remembering how that llama had spit its cut all over Crane, she smiled. If the llama hadn't done that, Crane would never have driven off without her. Thanks, Brown Llama, she called. She hoped the one Crane caught today spit on him, too. It would serve him right. As the path got steeper, it was harder for Molly to keep going. Her back ached. Her Her shoulder throbbed and her feet hurt, right down to the ends of her toes. She suspected that her feet had frostbite, and maybe her hands too. Finally, she reached the lift cables and flipped the switch. She could hear the cables creaking as the lift came down. When it reached the bottom, she sat down on it, grateful for the chance to rest. Without being told to, Bucky sat beside her. Molly pushed the switch again, and the lift swung once more into the air and up the side of the mountain. This time, she thought, it really will be the last trip. Bucky leaped off the lift as soon as it stopped and ran straight to Glendon. Molly moved more slowly. It was even harder to walk in the snow than it had been on the trail. She kept her head down, for the wind was blowing again, and small icy particles of snow stung her cheeks. Ow! Molly's head jerked up, and a shiver of apprehension made the hair on the back of her neck prickle. She looked ahead. Bucky sat in the snow beside Glendon, with his head thrown back and his muzzle pointed at the sky. Ow! Ow! He howled again. And Molly remembered Glendon's words. Dogs howl like that when their owner dies. Was Glendon dead? Had she struggled up here only to find that she was too late? Tears spilled from Molly's eyes and froze to her cheeks. She plodded forward until she reached Glendon. His eyes were closed. Crying harder, she dropped to her knees beside him and rubbed her mittens on the sides of his face. "Wake up, Glendon," she cried. "I'm here and I'm going to take you home. Wake up." She was sobbing now, nearly hysterical. Without knowing what she was doing, she lifted Glendon's head and held him close, trying to warm him. "Come, Bucky," she cried, and when the dog stood beside her, she circled his neck with one arm and drew him closer to Glendon, too. Bucky began to lick Glendon's face, slurping his big tongue on Glendon's eyes and cheeks and chin. Molly rocked back and forth, cradling Glendon's head with one arm and hugging Bucky with the other. Glendon moaned. Another shiver went down Molly's spine, but this time it was a thrill of excitement. He was alive. Moving quickly now, she tied the wooden spoon to his left arm, using the dish towel and trying not to move him any more than necessary. Then she took the coil of rope off her shoulder and carefully tied one end around Glendon's feet, pulling the knot tight. She fastened the other end to Bucky's harness. Bending down, she put one hand firmly under each of Glendon's arms and lifted until his head rested under her stomach. "Go, Bucky, go!" Bucky started forward. The rope went taut, and Glendon groaned again as Bucky struggled to move. Molly lifted Glendon's shoulders higher, trying to take more of the weight herself. His arms dangled down with his fingers trailing in the snow. She looked at the left arm. It seemed straight. The spoon was doing its job. Slowly, slowly, they moved toward the lift. The crust of ice which had formed on the snow overnight helped. Molly was glad that Glendon wasn't any bigger than he was. She could tell it was taking every bit of Bucky's strength to pull that rope. Bucky put his nose down, clearly straining with every step. Molly followed, trying to keep Glendon's head up, trying to help carry some of the weight. "Go, Bucky, good dog!" When they got to the lift, Bucky stopped, and Molly gently rolled Glendon onto the lift bed. Bucky sat beside them, his sides heaving and his tongue hanging out. "Good dog," Molly said, as she nuzzled her face in the fur on his neck. "Fine, fine dog." When the lift lurched to a stop at the bottom, Glendon opened his eyes. "Molly," he whispered, "is that you?" "We're almost home," she said, "just a little longer." She wasn't sure if she was trying to encourage Glendon or Bucky or herself, but she liked hearing herself talk. "I can see the barn now, and the house," she said. "Soon we'll have something hot to eat and warm blankets on us." 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. Molly's vision blurred again, and she began counting the steps out loud, trying to keep herself coherent. 1 step, 2 steps. Walk, 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 walk. They passed the barn and headed for the house. At last, when she thought she could go no further, they reached the back porch. Bucky stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked at Molly. She imagined he was asking if she really expected him to pull Glendon up those stairs. There were only 2 steps, but there might as well have been 50. Molly knew that neither she nor Bucky had enough strength left to get Glendon into the house. But she couldn't leave him outside. Although it was warmer down here than it was up on the mountain, it was still chilly, and the ground was damp. Glendon needed to be where it was dry and warm. She put Glendon's head down on the ground and untied the rope. As she climbed the steps, she swayed slightly and had to grasp the railing in order to keep from falling. Once inside, she heated another mug of milk and stirred hot chocolate mix into it. She took a few sips herself and carried it outside. She sat on the bottom step and lifted Glendon's head. He shifted and opened his eyes. "Drink this," she said, and she put the mug to his lips. Glendon took a sip, choked, and spit most of the hot chocolate out. "Try again," Molly said. "You have to drink it. It'll give you enough strength to go inside where it's warm." Glendon took another sip, and this time it went down. He took another sip and then another. When he paused, Molly took a turn. She didn't care if they shared the same mug. It tasted wonderful. She offered the mug to Glendon again, and this time he took it in his right hand and held it himself. When it was empty, Molly said, "You need to get inside. See if you can make it up the steps." She held out her hand to him. He took it, but she was unable to pull him to his feet. She dropped his hand. "Crawl," she said. Using his good arm, Glendon crawled slowly up the steps and into the kitchen. Molly held the door for him, and Bucky ran forward every few feet to sniff Glendon's face and lick him on the cheek. When he was inside, Glendon put his head down on the floor. "I can't go any farther," he said. He was shaking so hard he could hardly speak. "You don't need to," Molly said as she closed the door. She knew there were plenty of blankets upstairs on the beds, but she didn't have the energy to climb the stairs and get them. She picked up the throw rug from the kitchen floor and put it on top of him. "Up on the mountain, when I came to," Glendon said, "you were crying. You were so still, and Bucky sat beside you and howled. It scared me. I remembered what you said. I thought—" Her voice quavered. "I guess I was wrong about the howling. Maybe dogs do that when they sense death is near." "Well, I hope he never does it again." "Me too." Glendon smiled at Molly. "I'm hungry," he said. "So am I," Molly said, "but I'm too tired to do anything about it." Then she remembered the banana. She reached in her pocket, took out the banana, peeled it, and broke it in half. "Here," she said. "Here's your dinner. Or is it your breakfast?" "Thanks," he said, as he smiled at her and ate the banana. Molly sat at the table and looked down at her cousin. She didn't know which amazed her more, the fact that the 2 of them were still alive, or the fact that Glendon kept smiling at her. She wondered if they could possibly be friends, after all. She also wondered why he had been so mean to her before. And that's the end of our chapter, Chapter 11. Next time it'll be Chapter 12.